Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 13 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by, yes, you've guessed it, lead cloud engineer John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Wouldn't it be really funny if it was somebody else all of a sudden? And I just wasn't
Maybe
here.
one day, it will be, but
Amazing.
you are part of the furniture. Even though you keep changing your furniture on a regular basis, you are
Well,
part of the proverbial furniture. So.
I am gonna rework the office again at some point and stop using this sofa, I think, and go back over at the desk area. But I need to sort the backdrop out for that because currently it's an IKEA Kallax full of just rubbish.
It does seem to be a bit wrong to be working from a sofa because you're not a therapist.
Maybe I need therapy working with you.
Maybe, but you're not going to get that yourself by doing this podcast, are you?
Oh, it is quite cathartic sitting here and whinging for half an hour a week.
Indeed it is. So we are joined today by a very special guest, Sam Waweru from Nairobi. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm good.
Excellent. Tell us a bit about what you do for a living, Sam, and what you do around AWS.
Okay. My name is Samuel, first of all. I like saying that I'm a problem solver based in Nairobi, passionately working on impactful AI solutions. I'm here today as a Kaggle advisor with the Kaggle BIPOC Fellowship, where I train data scientists, machine learning engineers, how to build not only models, but also to deploy them on the cloud, on AWS. So by extension, I can say that that's where I intersect with AWS. And it's always fun working on it.
Great. So have you got any interesting stories to tell about large language models? Anything fun or exciting going on in that? I mean, it's a very exciting space right now, but anything particularly you've worked on?
Okay, maybe something exciting that happened last week was the Shelby OpenAI animator was something. I think you've seen it on Twitter. Where you can animate your images, and it's threatening the art world a lot.
Oh, the copyright infringement of Studio Ghibli's art style. That's what you mean.
That one, yeah. So that's something that I was looking at over the weekend as I was reading the article.
A little bit of a bandwidth issue there with Sam, but let's move on, and hopefully the connection will stabilize. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, we once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter, and then John and I pick a selection of the articles that we'd like to talk about on the podcast with our guest. And we have such a selection of articles this week, and the first article is a new feature announcement, and it's a bit of a mouthful when I mentioned this earlier. The Amazon Application Recovery Controller announces AWS FIS recovery action for zonal autoshift. Thankfully, FIS was in there as an acronym because that actually stands for Fault Injection Simulator. Would have been even more of a mouthful if it was in there in its full form. But we seem to have lost Sam for a moment there. Let me bring him back. Sorry, Sam,
we should press on.
Back.
Yeah.
So, cool.
I'm back.
We've spoken about fault injection simulator before, I think, John. But this one's quite interesting. I guess it's the ability to simulate complete loss of an AWS availability zone, right?
Effectively, yeah, and yes, you whinging about the acronyms in this. It's even worse than that because it's Amazon Web Services Fault Injection Simulator. It's just huge amounts of words in this one. But yes, effectively, yes. I've been a bit kind of meh on FIS kind of generally because it's, well, you're injecting faults to see how your application copes with it. And it's always kind of felt a bit tick boxy to me. It's sort of proving to an auditor or for DR reasons or whatever that you can cope with this arbitrary thing. So, well, I know it'll work because I've architected it properly and it's kind of all the rest of it. But and it's always felt to me a bit of an old-fashioned thing to have to do because back when I worked for big investment firms and we used data centers and stuff, then yes, we had to validate that the things that we'd built to cope with DCs going down, power cuts, and all the rest of it actually worked. We had to validate that. And my attitude, maybe because I'm a millennial, with the cloud has been, well, that's Amazon's problem. And if it doesn't work, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. So what's the point? But I suppose in this particular case, it's making sure that you've done your job properly and that you've done your multi-AZ architecture properly, or your multi-region architecture or whatever properly, and that you can see the traffic shifting away because you've gone, that AZ is dead to me. Does all of my traffic and all my resources, do they fail over properly? How long do they take? How much time am I going to be down? So that you can check things like your RTO, and your RPO as well, I suppose, if it's relevant, depending on what your failover mechanisms are. So it's interesting. It's the sort of thing that you're going to know if you need it. Like if you're not already caring about things like this, if you're using, let's say, I'm not going to tell people off for this because I do this in certain scenarios as well. If you're using single availability zone because you care about costs and you don't particularly care so much about your recovery time because, the AZ is dead, I don't really mind. That's not a critical workload, or I care about more about my costs, or I have a component in there that can't be multiple availability zone because it's because of whatever it is. Maybe it's Redis and it's not clustered, for argument's sake. Then okay, fine. And then this is kind of not for you. But if you're doing things properly and you're using scaling groups and you're using multi-AZ RDS, and you're using clusters for your Elasticache, and you're doing replication for, I don't know, MQ or whatever, then this is really interesting because you can say, simulate a data center going bye-bye. And you can watch it happen in near real time effectively. Go, oh, look, everything's moving over here and everything's coming up and my read replicas are being promoted or my standby instance has been promoted or whatever. And I can see the impact on my P95s, my P99s and all of this really cool stuff. So as a nerd, this is brilliant because I just want to push the button and see what happens when you kill an availability zone. But as a pragmatist, I don't see myself using this hugely. But then it's not kind of stuff that we do a lot of. We do a lot of looking after stuff that's already there, and we do a lot of just architect it properly in the first place and trust the cloud to do the cloud's job. I suppose this is just validating that.
Cool. Sam, anything to add on that? What were your thoughts on this one?
I share my thoughts with John. It can seem a bit odd to now test it again, but I think there's some industries like the financial industry, healthcare industry that should, and it's a must that they have such services where they can test what if a data center fails, what happens to the clients or the data of our patients. So yeah, it's useful. Simulators are also extremely useful in any application. So it's a good step.
Yeah, I think in large complex environments, I guess it's, you mentioned, John, everything should have been architected properly in the first place. But, if it's a large complex environment with lots of microservices and that kind of thing, then maybe there's something that's been overlooked. Maybe there's something that hasn't been deployed properly that this is going to kind of surface when you actually run the simulation and the test. Yeah, I guess it could be useful from that perspective. And just to be able to say you've done it.
Yeah, it's a tick box to me. The challenge I have with this primarily is AZ, let's use London for an example. EUS 2A and 2B and 2C are not the same from one customer to the next. For my personal organization, which obviously I have an organization because I do things properly in my own workloads, I don't, is not the same as the Logicata organization or any of our clients' organizations. It's not the same because AWS does this kind of, it's not round robin, but they balance the workloads of their customers between data centers. So there's 3 of them, at least. I don't know exactly how many, but there's 3 of them, at least, to cover London for A, B, and C. Yeah. And A, B, and C for customer 1 is not the same as A, B, and C for customer 2 or customer 3 or customer 4. They're kind of balanced between them. So is it entirely viable that an entire data center is going to go down? Yes. Is that going to mean that you're definitely going to lose data center A? No. You might lose A, someone else might lose B, but you still need to account for that. It's not a case of I just won't use the one that's going to go down more often because it's not the same for everybody.
Cool. Okay. Food for thought. definitely. On that note, let's move along to the second article for this week. And this is another feature announcement. This one's all about CloudFormation. So AWS CloudFormation now supports targeted resource scans in the IAC generator. So IAC, obviously infrastructure as code. I know my TLAs, but I don't know much about CloudFormation. It's not my infrastructure as code. It's not really my area. So John, tell us about targeted resource scans in the IAC generator. Why is this a
I think
benefit?
this is worth me fiddling with this to get this to work. This is definitely worth a... Go on, do it. Oh, come on. Damn Apple reactions. They're not. Let's see if I can get that one to work. Yeah, that one works. It's worth a party for this one. This makes IAC generator actually kind of viable now, because if you look at some of the third-party tools for resource scanning and generating IAC. So let me start that game, because that's not going to make sense. CloudFormation reasonably recently introduced the ability to record what you were doing. So you click through and it would record these steps, and then it would generate some IAC for you. And then you could use that to kind of progress to staging and production from your ClickOps setup. Okay, wonderful. Not terribly helpful. Resource Scanner came along, and that was good, but it would scan basically everything within like the set of resources that it could understand, because it couldn't scan everything in creation. It would generate you a whacking great CloudFormation template for here's everything that's here. Sorry. And you'd have to go and pick through and work out the bits that you want, because for argument's sake, you don't want to, I don't know, make your SSH keys via IAC, because that's quite viable that you want to do that in the console. Or say you've got Route 53 as your DNS provider, but you don't want to use infrastructure as code to validate Route 53, because it's really common that people want to just manage their DNS by hand, because that's what they're kind of used to doing. Previously, everything would have just been scanned. Here you go. And then you've got to kind of go through the template and pick out the bits you don't want. Now you can say, I actually only care about these types of resources, please. So don't scan in my base VPC, for argument's sake. Only tell me about the EC2s in it, because the VPC is kind of irrelevant for the purposes of the template. I'm just going to tell it where to go. I'll put a parameter in or whatever, and it will just put them in the VPC for me. Thanks very much. That makes this kind of viable now, in place of something like the one that comes to mind is Forma 2, which it does Terraform and it does CloudFormation. But there's a bunch of others that do just Terraform as well, where you can say, I care about these resource types in this account. Go scan and give me a template, please. So that makes something like this actually viable for you to use it, but only if you're still within the AWS ecosystem in terms of I want to use CloudFormation or I want to use CDK. So if you want Terraform, you're still out of luck on this one. Other tools exist that you can do this with. But if you do need to stay in the AWS ecosystem, you do need to create something like CloudFormation stacks. This is great, because you can just go, here's the things that I need to get in this stack. Bang, template, stack, done. Wonderful.
So before I ask Sam his opinion on this one, is it swaying you away from Terraform now? Because I know you're more of a Terraform fanboy than you are a CloudFormation fanboy.
Well, I'm not a fan of one thing or another. I'm firmly a pragmatic engineer, and it's tools for the job. I will use SAM rather than anything else for serverless stuff, because it's better, but I'll use Terraform for the majority of things. This doesn't really change my opinion on which tool is better for the certain jobs. It just makes generating CloudFormation from existing environments much less horrible. So if you need to do that, great.
So what about you, Sam? When he said he's going to use SAM for his serverless, he didn't mean you. He meant the serverless application. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this new feature?
Yeah, I agree. I think this targeted approach, where you can just take whatever you want and the related resources that you have to use, is very useful, because instead of spending weeks and of now writing everything, and now you can even target what specifically you want. It's a very useful feature when it comes to the entire process of expanding your applications.
Cool. Well, sounds like you're both very happy with this particular announcement. So, so much so it warranted some Apple reactions when John finally managed to get them working.
I mean,
But,
time will tell how useful this is, because the experience I've got with, I've not used Forma 2 recently, but the experience I've got with other scanning and IAC creation tools is they do like to make very weird connections between things. So the example I like to use is one of the ones that I've used. I forget the name of it now, but it had this nasty habit of it would link. If you just needed a slash for just a root, because IAM policies can have a path in them. If you just needed root, which is 95% of policies will have, and something else had an output that was just a forward slash, it would link those resources together for no good reason. It's like, well, that's the same value as that, so I'm going to import that across to there. Time will tell whether this does that kind of weird non-association that you can have with these tools. But steps in the right direction, absolutely.
well, watch this space, and maybe we'll talk about that in a future episode when time has had an opportunity to tell. But on that note, let's move along to our third article for this week. And this one's not specifically about AWS, really. This is an article on Forbes all about secrets management and why secrets management should be a central pillar of cloud security. So it does mention AWS in a couple of places, but secrets management really is absolutely a central pillar, regardless of which cloud platform or where your applications and your data is hosted. So we all know that secrets should not be in source code. So where should they be, John?
Well, before we talk about that, I'd just like to apologise to anyone that does go and read this article if you don't have an ad blocker, because it's very full of ads. I'd just like to apologise for that ahead of time.
Well, Forbes is normally quite a quality publication, isn't it? But yeah,
the
it does have a
writing's
lot of
great.
ads on it. So,
The writing's great, and the article's fine, but it's very ad heavy, this one, for some reason. I couldn't tell you why. Right, so let's go through it a little bit. So common ways that they're exposed include hard-coded creds, which we've just spoken about, misconfigured cloud storage. So again, that's putting creds in things like Open S3 buckets, which you really shouldn't do, and overprivileged access controls. And that's things like everybody having admin, or your Lambda execution role having, power user, when all it actually needs is to read one secret. It doesn't need access to the entire secret estate, that kind of thing. Why is that a problem? Well, you start thinking about things like privilege escalation. You start thinking about leaking data, and you start just thinking about generally things that aren't meant to be happening can start happening. And the article starts to talk about I am alone cannot protect exposed secrets. Well, no, this is true, because depending on how kind of effective you've been at your least privilege implementation, yes, if you're already overprivileged and you've then leaked, then you're stuffed. Okay. Firewalls do not secure cloud creds. No, they don't, because it's on the internet, lads. It's just out there. So, but that only affects things inside my little. Nope. You can be way outside of AWS, and if you've got API keys, you can go use them. Have fun. And MFA is ineffective against automated attacks. Now, that's not entirely true. It's a little bit of an inflammatory statement, because it very much depends on your settings, but MFA by itself is ineffective, right? You have to worry about things like credential timeouts and that sort of thing, because if you have, let's not call it long-lived, but not ephemeral credentials. Let's not ephemeral, but say you've got an MFA your MFA lasts for 30 seconds, and you've got your temporary creds, and they last for 12 hours. That's quite a lot of damage you can do in 12 hours. It's not a full forever access, but it's quite a lot of damage you can do in 12 hours, to the extent that you could, in theory, create some forever credentials after the fact. So that's worrisome. It talks about best practices as well, and we've got things like centralizing your secret storage. That's a good idea, because if it's sprawled, secret sprawl is a term, and it's a problem, and it makes it harder to manage things. Talks about least privilege, which we've gone on and on and on and on about on this podcast, so I'm not going to go into that. Talks about automated secret rotation. Now, this is an interesting one, because if it's machine to machine, sure, rotate them every damn day if you feel like it, because you're going to minimize your blast radius. But it's been proven that rotating things like passwords for humans is really ineffective, because people just pick passwords that they can remember, and they're not terribly secure. So use that one kind of with a pinch of salt. Monitoring, yes. DevSecOps integration, okay. Editor has found a buzzword, whatever. That's just scan your stuff for secrets. And then it talks about regs, and I don't want to go into the regulation, but the long and the short of it is secrets management is hard. IAM and access control is hard. Both of these things together are very hard, and people get them wrong all the time. So it's absolutely worth just going back to basics from time to time and just saying, look, are we scanning for secrets in our pipelines? Do we have anybody with significant credentials that they shouldn't do? Are we forcing machine-to-machine creds to rotate every so often, and how are we handling that? So the example I like to use now is, because we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago with Brian, actually, is for most RDS databases these days, you can automatically have your admin password rotating, but you're not meant to use that anyway. So that's not brilliantly helpful still, because you're not meant to be using that password anyway. But if you are, then you can go and read it from Secrets Manager at runtime and that kind of thing. But it's back to basics again and again and again. And I think we're going to be talking about this until you're already a bit grey, but until I'm already a bit grey, until we're both retired. Let's go with that.
Well, the funny thing about my grey hair is it's actually been there since I was 16, and I haven't gone any more grey, and I'm now 51. So I've had that bit of grey hair for the last however many years. That's 35 years, I think. And there's a little grey bit in my beard there as well, but I think that matches the grey streak in the hair. I didn't have the beard when I was 16. I probably wasn't capable of growing a beard at that age, but there we are. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this, Sam? The secrets management side of things is relevant in your world?
Yes, I think one of the illustrations done by the article was on Uber 2022 breach, where an attacker found like admin credentials had coded in the PowerShell script. And if you look at the history of that attack, it started off as a social engineering issue, where one of the employees of Uber was tricked into giving up his credentials. Then from there, it all went haywire. And I think social engineering is also something that needs to be enforced, especially the defense aspect. How can an employee recognize an attack and protect themselves and protect the company from an intruder from that angle?
Yeah, we are bombarded with phishing attempts and other scams these days. It's very difficult to know. It's very difficult to be always on your guard. I was caught out by a phishing scam last year and gave my Microsoft credentials away. Thankfully, in that case, MFA did save me because I didn't give my MFA token, and therefore the damage was limited. But a lot of these things spread automatically nowadays, and I mean, literally every single day there is a whole bunch of phishing attempts that come through into my inbox that the spam filter hasn't managed to catch. So you've always got to be on your guard and make sure that you're not going to be the next victim of a scam like that.
Do you know the different types of phishing, chaps? Because they're fun. There's lots of them.
Smishing. Phishing via SMS. Yeah.
Vishing, which is video. So on video call, it has its own subtype for some reason. I like spear phishing personally because that's targeted phishing at one person. I like that one.
Well, there we go. Yes, we should know all of that because it's in our annual cybersecurity training that we have to do as part of our ISO 27001 certification. So that's how I knew about smishing.
It sounds horrible, doesn't it? It's such an awful sound.
Yeah. Well, I've been on the receiving end of some smishing attacks recently as well. I can't remember what they were now. Oh, delivery. Lots of every delivery notifications coming through. We are delivering your parcel. No, you're not. I haven't ordered anything. But
thing is, as user group leads, that's an actual thing that we have now. Is you have a delivery that you've missed? Have I?
Yeah. Random swag delivery in the post. So you don't want to miss out on that, but you also don't want to get smished. So Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our next article for this week, and this is a post on the AWS news blog about how detailed geographic information for all AWS regions and availability zones is now available. So Sam, I know this is one that you were interested in, so I'm going to come to you first on this one. What are your thoughts here on this detailed geographic information that's now available?
I think we kind of touched on that before we began. AWS was vague, especially when it came to choosing your region. They're not that detailed on availability zones. So it's a good approach to enable organizations now select which availability zones that are close to them, that can reduce any form of latency, that can enable them now to meet compliance very fast. So yeah, giving out this information and making it available to your customers and your client is a good step. Other cloud infrastructures and cloud services are offering this. So I think AWS is the right direction.
What I thought when I read it was that there's nothing new here. I wasn't seeing any new information in the screenshot that you couldn't already get. I mean, maybe they've broken it out into a separate column or something. What do you think, John? What's new here?
There's nothing new here if you own a map and can read. But I suppose they're just directly calling things out now as opposed to inferring them. So the screenshot shows a smattering of US and Canada regions, right? So it says US West, Oregon, geography, United States of America. I can read and I own a map or I have access to Google. Obviously, that's where that is. But it was never explicitly said that that's where that was. It was kind of that's what it was called and that's what the latency data kind of bore out. But it was never explicitly said that the US West Oregon region was actually in the United States of America and not on some container ship off the coast or whatever. That's I think the difference here is if you possess a brain and can read, and I'd like to think all of our listeners can, because you probably had to use a computer to find us, and that involves some level of reading. This isn't anything new or groundbreaking, but it feels like they're just appeasing the regulators because they're now explicitly saying where things are. Like the Canada Central region is in Canada. Duh. But they've said it's in Canada now. They've committed to it in writing that it's in Canada. It's not just inferred.
Is this possibly another side effect of Brexit that the UK region is still called the EU West 1 and the EU West 2 and we're not actually in the EU anymore?
I don't think a large American company cares about the UK to that level of extent. I really don't think they care. I think this is more because they call out specifically in the article further down about places that they're adding AZs to. They call the EU sovereign cloud out specifically. So I don't think that they care that the UK is no longer in the EU because whatever, right? That's kind of a whatever. But they will call out, I think, and I need to check. I might check that. Where does it say? Let's do it. Let's do it live, listeners. Let's do it live. It's still under Europe.
Oh no, this is going to go horribly wrong.
Regions. Give me a list view. It's not.
Well, while he's looking, Sam, because his live is not live enough for me. You mentioned other cloud providers are already doing this. Have you seen the information presented for other cloud providers? Do you think they go into more detail or similar level of detail to AWS?
I'd say that it's similar now that it's showing the availability zones where they're at. Azure, for instance, does show you where your availability zone is, and the Oracle cloud infrastructure. To some extent, although you have to depend on the Oracle infrastructure itself, yeah, it's clear, and yeah.
So, John, did you find what you were looking for?
Yeah, so it does say that Europe brackets London is in the United Kingdom. It does explicitly state that it's in the UK. And they do go on to list all the countries. I don't know if they did this before. They do go on to list all of the countries that have edge locations or where they are more specifically. So Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Athens in Greece, Barcelona in Spain, so on and so on and so on. And quite interestingly, it says Europe, Ireland is located in the Republic of Ireland. Because again, if you're not particularly uppity with your EU UK geography, you might not understand that the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland are different countries. You might not understand that. So that's worth knowing as well, because of Brexit shenanigans and kind of all the rest of it. They're on the same bit of land, but they're not the same countries, but some of the same rules apply. But it's okay. So the one that's EU West 1 is actually still in the EU. Cool. Wonderful.
So there we go. I mean, I think the US ones perhaps were always a bit more obvious, but perhaps it's a little bit more nuanced around some of the other locations where perhaps it wasn't obvious exactly where these locations are. So maybe it's better than we thought.
I didn't know that
when
Marseille
we
had an
first,
edge location.
well, there you go. Now you do. That's, yeah.
I have to go and find it.
Nice one to go and visit. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week. This is an article on Yahoo News about yet another leaky S3 bucket. We seem to be, I think we spoke about this last week with our guests, and we thought that perhaps we might be starting to see a few more of these leaky bucket articles. And that does seem to be the case, because I actually spotted another one today when I was bringing my news articles together this morning. But it wasn't this one. This one is an article with a great clickbaity title: Juicy Customer Data Leaked from 9. So of course I had to read it to find out what this juicy customer data was. But Sam, I know this is one's quite interesting to you as well. So was it the title that got you excited about this one, or what are your thoughts on this?
It's the title, but it was underwhelming because the data itself wasn't that juicy.
Yeah,
name,
I agree. Yeah.
Address, and contact location. So I think it does speak, because this one was an S3 bucket that was open to the internet, and it had only names, address, and location. But it does speak to security, even if you're hiring a contractor. I think a contractor was to be blamed for that one. So yeah, having that strict access control, that regular audit storage configuration, and yeah, of course, never leave your S3 bucket open to the internet.
Well, I'm with you there that I didn't think name and address was particularly juicy. I was expecting something perhaps a little bit more revealing.
It's PII.
It's PII, but PII is, to me, is not particularly juicy. It's important. Don't get me wrong. It's incredibly important to protect.
There's a 40-page EU directive.
Juicy just
about
implied
it,
something else to me.
The GDPR is.
That's not very juicy either, is it?
No.
EU directives are not juicy. You
mean you don't stay up late at night wondering about the GDPR, thinking about it? No, me either.
No. Not to play it down. It's obviously critically important, to us and our clients.
It's not credit card data. It's not.
I lie awake.
It's not credit card data.
I mean, Juicy was the which was the big dating site that got had a data breach. There was an American. I think it was an American dating.
Was it the one that was for married people?
It was to have affairs. Yes. So I forget what it was called. Now that's a juicy data breach. Here is a list of customers that have gone on a website which is set up specifically for married people to have extramarital affairs. That's my definition of a juicy data breach, not just names and addresses. So, I think the title was a little bit misleading there, but let's not to play down the importance of this, because obviously PII is critical to protect it. So, any more thoughts on it, John?
I think we said this with Johannes, I think it was last week, the rise of vibe coding, and I hate the term so much, and I threw up in my mouth a little bit there. We're going to see this more and more, I think. We're going to see this more and more, because it's going to be, we've seen this even without the whole AI coding assistant, with things like WordPress plugins, that even if you want to configure the bucket that it's reading stuff from, for instance, to not have public access and do things properly and read through CloudFront and all the rest of it, you still have to hand over control of the ACLs to the plugin that does it. You can't, set best practice at the account level, and it will just melt and go, no, I can't cope with this because I need to be able to set it. Even if I'm setting it properly, the plugin needs to do it. So I think this is going to happen more and more and more with vibe coding, and vibe coding of things that are then used by people that don't really understand what they're doing with them either, right? And I use the WordPress plugin example very deliberately, because WordPress is one of those great, awful things. I say that on purpose. It's one of those great and awful things that's massively democratized and really easy to get going with. But because of those things, it's really easy to get yourself into a mess. And if you're just using plugins that have been written by vibe coders and they've not been written properly, and then you don't really understand what they're doing on top of that, you can get in a real pickle with something like this.
Ashley Madison. I had to Google it.
That's
it was the website that was breached. Ashley Madison.
You Googled it, sure. You had to look it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that is my definition of a juicy data breach. Yeah, definitely something scandalous going on there. But anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 13 of Logicast. So if you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see John attempting to do his Apple reactions, you can also watch us on video on YouTube. So I'd just like to thank you, Sam, for joining us today, all the way from Nairobi. Well, you haven't come all the way from Nairobi. You're still in Nairobi, but
I'm still in Nairobi.
still great for you to be joining us from the other side of the world. Yeah. And thank you, John, as always, for sharing your insights. So that is all we've got time for. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.